I'm Vin.
I'm Sori.
That's Booby.
And Jumpy and Ghosty and Chip.
And James Martin Hadfield. Shoot a straw. Pull for you. Shut. Okay. Somebody got us that for Christmas last year.
Yep.
We never forgot you, big homie.
No. His other homies are over there.
Yep.
We just don't have them all out.
Okay, so this is Green Lung for the big homie. Who's this for?
Oh, this is for David.
The big homie, David. What's up, David? Yep. This is for you. Green Lung. The name of the song is Let the Devil In. Okay. For timely topical.
This is a Christian home. We will not be playing your request.
We will do no
Thank
such
you
thing.
for jumping on the $75 tier. Typical Christian.
Typical. Illuminati confirmed. For timely topical political commentary, you can hit us up in Middle America with Vin and Sori.
Yep. For those of you who are like, what are you guys talking about? If you want to have a song reacted to, then you can jump on Patreon and you can either go on the $1 tier or any other tiers in between, and that translates to points, so that way you can jump in an alliance and get your song kind of brought to our attention. But if you are the type of person that just wants to just get your song reacted to, that's what the $75 tier, that's where it's at currently, and that's what David did. David did that one so he could get us to listen to Let the Devil In. And
by the band
yep.
Green Lung. This should be very interesting.
Green Lung.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I didn't look at it as dislook because you know.
If you had a green lung,
how would you? It'd
be pretty gross.
No, green lung. I just thought like the environment, you know.
Not me. I thought of gangrene.
No, I thought of that. Like black lung is bad.
Yeah.
But that's when you're smoking and all that
right.
stuff. So anyway, this is Let the Devil In. Let's see. It might not have anything to do. It might not have anything to do with
green
the devil.
lung is for all those people that are vaping and smoking weed.
Oh, and for the big homie, every time we put Christians react, he always gets mad.
What?
And then Simon always goes, and you always complain about it.
Well, so here you are. This is to make your day. And go. Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, I thought this was going to be all black metal about the devil. It's not. Leave the title anyway to make the guy upset. I like doing it.
Maybe it will. You never know where it's going to go. Oh, I like this.
From the shops, the offices, and even the mansions of London, they sincerely believe in the existence of the power of the supreme spirit of evil, Satan.
say right off the bat that I really, really, really like this song, but I'm not gonna let the devil in. I'm gonna go there, but I really, 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 really like this.
What do you mean you're not gonna let the devil in? What do you think? What do you think "Let the Devil In" symbolizes here?
Well, you know, I'm not gonna answer that question, but I will say, that it reminded me of, how much do I want to say? Well, you know how we'll meet a lot of different people that basically, like, they kind of were pursuing after God, and then, like, all kinds of these, like, religious things happen, and it like, really, really affected them in a bad way. Just, like, even the way that they put it out in this song. You spent your whole life in the service of God, down on your 2 knees to save your soul. We've been watching, not that part, then it says, "Oh, sister, you've been told that making love is a sin. Open your heart and let the devil in," because, that whole topic is very complicated because whenever I heard it, because I grew up in the church, a lot of you know that, and whenever the topic of sex before marriage came up, it was always, yes, presented as this is this horrible, horrible sin, and that as a result of that sin, you could get pregnant, and like, that was really bad. And honestly, if I was to like kind of put it like how I felt like it was casted to me, it was like, sex was like the worst, but then if you got pregnant, that was like the worst thing that could happen to you. You could also get like STDs and stuff, but that wasn't as bad as getting pregnant. And so this to me seemed like one of those things, like, you know, some people are looking at it as, oh my gosh, like, there are worse things in the world you could be doing besides making love with somebody, and that's some big giant sin. But when you think about, what's the matter?
Go ahead.
Biblically speaking, there is not, to my understanding, is there a concept of, wasn't it that once you had sex, then you were married? Like, isn't that how they, like, made their vows,
I mean,
kind of?
you get that text in Deuteronomy, if 2 people are found together, then the guy basically has to pay the dowry, and then they have to marry each other.
Not if he's raping her. That's if.
Well, no, if you rape the girl, they would execute you.
Right.
But I just think the whole conversation on sexual mores, I think people just need to make up their minds. Because on the one hand, when we say, look, there's something transcendental and deeply metaphysical happening in the sexual act, they go, no, we're just animals, man. Mm-hmm. You know, like the song, "You and me, baby, ain't nothing but mammals, let's do it like we do on the Discovery Channel." Mm-hmm. But then at the same time, when you hear about sexual assault, nobody treats it as just a biological action.
Right.
When it's sexual assault, nobody says, "Oh, it's just
getting upset when that's what happens with the lions."
Nobody says, "Oh, it's just 2 men." When people go, "Whoa."
Yeah.
We're talking about putting the guy in jail for life.
Yep.
Rightly so. We're talking about executing him. I don't believe in execution, but if I did, that's the exception I would make. Mm-hmm. So it's like, well, when it's a sexual assault, you know very well that there's something deeper happening with the sexual act. Mm-hmm. But when it's, you can't control your urges, and she can't control her urges, and then blah, then all of a sudden we want to just strip it of all its transcendental meaning and say, hey, we're just animals. Well, make up your mind.
Right.
I think all of us know that something deeper is happening with sexuality than just 2 mammals getting together and whatever. Mm-hmm. I don't care what your worldview is. Mm-hmm. You know, there's what we say in an argument, and then there's what we know from intuition.
Yeah.
Now, the explanation for why it's such a... Or when you look at a 16-year-old girl, and she has the horrible misfortune of being around a crew of people like we were in high school, where you just... blah, you do your thing, and then you never call her again. You never talk to her again. You walk by her in the aisle like she doesn't exist. Why is she so deeply wounded by that? So this idea
why are you so upset when your kids are being treated that way?
Right. This idea that, hey man, just hey. Which I'm not necessarily certain that that's the message of the song, but that's the current sort of narrative that we're supposed to believe, that you know, Christian sexual mores is sort of this antiquated thing, and now we're this advanced group of people, and it's like I always say, there's no STD there's no condom for the emotional harm that happens to a lot of very young girls who go through high school and the hookup culture, and I've read so many, scholarly articles about the deleterious effects of hookup culture, particularly on young female minds. And, I'm always curious about how a lot of these liberation ideas always end up benefiting dudes. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And not to say that women don't like sex and that women don't like having multiple partners, yada, yada, yada. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, I think we've got to elevate the discussion about sex and sexuality on both sides of the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, because on the Christian side of the spectrum, I remember a very specific conversation we had with somebody where they were having a very hard time, honeymoon type of moment, because she was like, look, all your life you're told, do not do that, do not do that, there's all this fear around sexuality, and it was sin, and you had, and if you had sexual urges, that they were sinful, and they were bad, and then all of a sudden you got married, and whoop, now everything's okay. And she was like, she couldn't, and it really, it caused some severe dysfunction. And so, that's why when me and the boys have conversations, one's 11, one's 14, and we have conversations, we're doing our man study, yada, yada, yada. I say, look, fellas, your drives and your sexual urges are great. They're awesome. And if you feel them, ask God for more of them. The issue is what is the best and healthiest way to channel your sexuality?
Yeah.
And I think everybody has a line. Like, I've talked to so many men, and they're all, it's usually the pro porn people, and I'm like, would you tell your daughter that if she feels like she wants to have sex with every guy in your city, every one of them, that's a good thing to do? They'd say, well, of course not. Okay, that means you have a scale in your mind as to what healthy sexuality is and what isn't. And simply going with preventative measures are, that there's something metaphysical happening with sexuality, and that if your daughter has sex with 250 people in a city, then it's not good for her. Okay, so fine. So you have the scale of 250. Now, maybe the other guy says, well, I don't think one is, you know what I'm saying? Like, I want my daughter to one, right? Like the one guy that you're married to. I get it.
Yeah.
But you're in the scale somewhere. And I just think it's immature to say, this is puritanical and oppressive and this is freedom, when you know good and well that you're somewhere in that scale.
Right.
The question becomes, okay, why do you think this is healthy and why do you think this is unhealthy? That becomes the question. Because I think a lot of times, and Christianity is horrible at this, Christianity as far as the people who are explaining this stuff, especially to young men and young women and teenagers, is all they do is focus on what the rule is, but they don't focus on why the rule is.
Right.
And I think that is the problem. So it generates a certain type of hostility, because even the people enforcing the rules don't know why. Right? And so, like, like, if you're going on a highway, I think all of us know, like, if you see a seatbelt law, seatbelt sign, or if you see a sign that says we don't screw around, if you're caught drinking and driving, we're going to jam you up, and if you, criminal speeding, like, all of us know intuitively why that is. And the reason for that is because you could destroy other people's lives in a split second. And so, we don't do this show to be popular, so it is what it is. But 99% of the abortions that happen, I'm having a very good discussion with my friend on the sidebar, and he's bringing up, sexual assaults and its relationship to abortion. Horrible, horrible situation for the young lady to be in. The fact of the matter is, even the Guttmacher Institute, which is a reporting arm of Planned Parenthood, the vast majority of abortions have nothing to do with that.
It's like under 3% or something?
The vast majority of abortions are what they call convenience abortions, and that's because we're so now, he called it a necessary, and then he stopped calling it evil because he doesn't want to call it evil.
Right.
Which is fine. He's trying to be consistent, but it's like there are massive implications to how we manage our sexuality. And no matter what you think about whether or not abortion should be legal, I don't believe anybody believes that the act is good. Right? Like I don't hear anybody saying this is great, this is awesome. I don't hear women saying I'm so happy I don't hear anybody saying that.
Yeah, I guess they more focus on the liberation aspect of it.
Well,
they say is good.
Well, they want to come out from under an action that they committed in order to live the life the way that they planned it.
Yep.
And so, sure, currently in our current system, we can do that. Fine. And again, I'm not talking about assault. Assault is something completely different in this conversation. What I'm talking about is the vast majority of those actions, abortions are done due to this mentality about our sexuality and how we handle it. And so I don't think there's been a very good, this is why. It's always like, oh, you can get an STD or you can get a, whatever. So I explained to my boys, like, look, females handle sexuality differently than you do. You're gonna, and this is, and I tell the boys, like, this is stereotypical. Okay, this is general. So you might run into a female that doesn't fit that. But in the main, this is true. So what happens is when a woman is interacting with her sexuality, it's a lot of times it's more emotional. It's more the assumption of commitment, et cetera, et cetera. When a man is doing it, it's many times it's because he's in a physical moment. And hence why you have multiple cultures across the board, where you have one guy that can be with multiple women and all the rest of it is because he doesn't need to gin up all that emotional whatever to engage in a sexual practice with a young lady. And I said, I don't care what you hear from people. People are going to tell you this crazy narrative that women and men handle sexuality the same and da-da-da-da. And people, I've said this before and I've quoted doctors on this and whatever, and they're like, oh, you don't believe women enjoy sex? Nope, I believe women enjoy sex very much. As a matter of fact, they probably enjoy it more than men do because they've got multiple erogenous zones and they can have multiple orgasms and all the rest of it, and men are just kind of, so it's, it's basically it. It's like, Fortnite. You got the little sniper rifle, and then you got a duelist, and then you got the automatic. You know what I'm saying? So, no, I believe that women enjoy sexuality very much and very deeply. It's obvious that they handle sexuality more from an emotional standpoint than a physical standpoint in the main. So my boys need to understand that. So especially one of them is going to be extremely handsome, he's going to have access to a lot of opportunities. And I said, look, one of the main reasons that I don't want you to have access to all these women is because you're going to hurt a lot of them. You're going to hurt a lot of them. They, many times they look at it as a giving of something deep of themselves that they're giving to you, and you're looking at it as, I feel like this and I want to get off and all that. And I'm like, that's one of the reasons that God tells you to save yourself for your marriage. And just like what the Christian girl said, which is, I'm supposed to, look at this as a horrible, sinful, terrible thing, icky, nasty, gross, yada, 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 and then boom, on my wedding night, I'm supposed to flip. Well, have we ever thought about it from the other perspective, which is, hey, you're supposed to do what makes you feel good and makes you feel good and makes you feel good and makes you feel good, and that's, hey, man, it's all about you and your pleasure, and then the minute you get married, you're supposed to stay committed to this one person.
That's true.
Now it flips because you signed a piece of paper.
Yeah.
When you socialize this person to indulge themselves in what they feels good, and I think all of us would say it would be a pretty scummy thing to do if your wife is 8 months pregnant to go off and cheat on her because she's no longer physically desirable to you in that moment. I think all of us universally, whether you're a Satanist, atheist, Christian, I think all of us would say that's a really freaking scummy thing to do. But if the person's been taught to manage their sexuality as you come first, there shouldn't be any limits to your experience of pleasure, which I'm not saying that this song is. What I'm talking about more is our cultural narrative.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
When you talk about any sort of limitations to pleasure or sexuality, they'll immediately say you're puritanical and when you're afraid of pleasure and blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, so you tell a person that their pleasure is primary in the sexual act, and they're, all that great. So then how could you tell the guy that he's a scumbag for doing that to his wife? He's supposed to flip all of a sudden? It's the same thing with the Christians. You tell this girl or this guy that sexuality is nasty, it's horrible, you fill their head with all this fear around it, and then and then you don't celebrate it at all, but then when they get married, then you go, okay, you're good now. Mm-hmm. Like, nobody thinks about these things.
Yeah.
And, so I tell the boys, like, sexuality is awesome. It's great. It shows the character of God, that the way, the first thing he commanded, I said, boys, the first thing God commanded us to do was have sex. Be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth. I said, God commanded us to have sex and have lots of it. And I said he made it extremely pleasurable. So this is great. This is awesome. However, anytime you have something that is that powerful, then you've got to handle it responsibly. Mm-hmm. Because sexuality carries with it the power to create life, to destroy life, and I mean that on the physical plane and the emotional plane. We all, and there have been a lot, and the great tragedy of our current context is that women are not allowed to talk about the feeling of being taken advantage sexually anymore. Mm-hmm. They're not allowed to feel that way anymore. They're not allowed to express that at all.
Right.
They're the closest they can come is the Me Too stuff, which I think there was a lot of that actually going on with the Me Too movement. Mm-hmm. But aside from when you were being assaulted, if you voluntarily did something but you felt used and you felt like you lost something, there's no place for you anymore. No. Because our society has bought the silly narrative that women aren't more emotional with sexuality than men. It's just a lie. It's untrue. It's untrue. So I get it as far as like looks to me to be a reaction to the puritanical version of Christian sexuality, which is not technically puritanical, because like I told you, there was a Puritan woman who brought her husband up for charges in the church because he was refusing her conjugal rights. So they almost excommunicated the guy because he wasn't putting out enough for his wife. It's a true story. So we've got to. It's really interesting. Christianity and Judaism has a very Islam too, but has a very rich sexual history, and
I can't imagine putting somebody in that situation and then they have sex with you after, and it's just because you brought them to the leaders.
It's a strange. The whole thing was strange to me. I was like, what? Okay, that's very awkward. I think Edwards was involved in that whole situation. But so like, if you just take the pop portrayals of what Christianity is and how it relates to sexuality, especially like the evangelicalism my mom was kind of a rebel. So we didn't have a bunch of discussions about sexuality, but she came from the medical field, so she was dealing with AIDS patients and da-da-da-da-da. So she was more like, I guess you could say it was fear-mongering, but she was like watching people die, and this is even before AZT and all that stuff. AZT is what people used to take to help them, but it really didn't, whatever. I mean, we've got stuff now that's really taken off, but so she was dealing with this late 80s, early 90s when people were like, that was a debt, like you were done. Oh, yeah. And it was massive in the black community. So she was coming at it from a very clinical perspective, like, look, she sat me and my older brother down. She basically said, like, I know people are curious. And then, so she looked at my brother, and then she goes, and I just know you. And then she looked at me. She was absolutely right. She was 100, and she was, she would, so that was like it was like a 3 or 4 hour ordeal, that entire discussion.
Oh, wow, really?
Oh, yeah. And so that was the sort of mentality. Like, it wasn't a holistic biblical thing, it was more of this clinical thing, and I was, 14, 12, I think I was 12 at the time, and I was more interested in baseball than girls. I mean, this girl had this giant crush on me, and I didn't even notice because I was so focused on beating the Pirates, because we were such a better team than them, but we could never beat them for whatever reason. So anyway, this is really, really interesting stuff because, let the devil in kind of is a metaphor for just forget all those silly sexual mores and have fun and have a lot of sex and all that. And
Well, I kind of felt like he was talking about himself, too.
That he was the devil.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Because he told her to come in nothing but that robe.
Right.
It was like, just let the devil in.
Right.
Open your heart and let the devil in.
Right, which is open your legs and let me in. Right?
Yeah.
That's what he's saying. That's what he's saying.
All right.
And he's brilliant. Mm-hmm. Right? Because he's making it about some higher principle when in reality he's just trying to, whatever. So I just think that we just need to have a less simplistic discussion around
you might be wrong. You might be wrong on that because it might be that, he sees the way that the religious world has kind of made that sexuality. So he's just like, understanding where they're going to view it, like just let the devil in. But it's really like, maybe, I don't know, maybe...
You think because he deeply loves her?
Maybe he does, like, because he says...
Where in the lyrics here does it make you believe that he deeply loves her?
Maybe because he calls her sister.
Well, I mean, it's possible because he calls it making love. He doesn't say having, a wild raucous sex. He calls it making love. So it could be, it could be he's her boyfriend, she's religious, and he wants to take their relationship to the next level. And so that's where he's going with it. You know what I'm saying? So it could be because he characterizes the act of making love, which is great. It's better than, do like we do on the Discovery Channel.
Right, yeah.
Craziness people come up with. Your point is well taken. Like if you want to be cynical, maybe I'm just reading how we were in high school to how this guy is. He might be a little bit different from how we were in high school. We were completely ruthless in high school.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean he's completely ruthless. He might be wanting to commit to her forever and all the rest.
Well, I don't know about committing to her forever, but I don't necessarily know if it was just this, like, come on down, he's going to do that and then just dump her off the side. The fact that he knows how she's been taught about it and how her, religion has been about it and that he wants to, I don't know.
Yeah, and he's saying we.
Yeah.
And he's telling her to take part in some sort of ritual, so it might be very literal, and he might be saying, take part in this ritual. And there's been a lot of...
Yeah, our Lord and Master has great plans.
It is not... You have to note that in a lot of these religions, that sexuality, it just so happens that sexuality is part of the worship. And I think that that's very instructive. Like I'm not... So... but again, that just tells me that for all of human history, we have known that something transcendental and metaphysical, something deeply important is happening in the sexual act that we have to come to terms with. And I think, eventually, probably in the next 15, 20 years, because pendulums swing all the time, that we're going to come to the acceptance of the fact that, no, this is not just... Two bodies, two mammals running into it. There's something deeper here, and we're gonna have to. We need to accept that, and then figure out how to manage that. Then
it's interesting because when you think about other religions, and if other religions have sex as part of their worship, but then you think in our religion, God is like you have a job to do. But I'm going to make sex a big major part of that job. You know what I mean? It's like, well, that's pretty cool.
The central.
Yeah.
Be
like,
fruitful,
that's the only way to make it happen. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's, usually work is meant to be miserable, but...
Yeah.
Yeah,
and again, you can look at it from a theological perspective and say, oh, God's really good. Or you can look at it as saying, well, Moses wanted to create a fertility cult, but he didn't want to make a fertility cult the way that the Canaanites had it, so this is the way that they did it. You know what I mean? Which is fine. I don't care either way. All I'm saying is you cannot say that that Christianity is as a pure religion as far as what you see in the scriptures, something that stifles and stymies sexual activity. What it does argue, though, is this idea that there's something bigger happening, and if you do that outside of the confines of a deep commitment to another person, then damage is always going to ensue either physically or metaphysically.
Right.
And the crazy thing is that the heroes of the Bible, David, Abraham, all the major heroes of the Old Testament, the vast majority of them were not monogamous sexual practices. I would say that David's orientation was probably polyamorous, obviously. And so, but then you see the wreckage that it brought to his life and his family and all the rest of it. And so the Bible's pretty honest on both sides of it, but I do think that as a whole, we've got to do much better at educating our boys and our girls and our teenagers about sex and what sexuality is, what's happening to their bodies, taking away the guilt for, look, some of the, especially your teenage boys, sometimes it happens overnight. And then there's all this religious guilt around it. And so, I've made it my mission for them to celebrate all that shit. This is great. This is good. You woke up in the morning and I had too much information. Sorry, this is good. Celebrate it, because I don't believe that God meant for us to attach all this guilt toward these feelings. And people say, oh, for things that come naturally to you. I believe it's beyond that. From a Christian worldview, it's not. It's something, a gift that God gave you. We're making these kids and these teenagers feel guilty for a gift that God gave them. And I would just rather say, this is a love your neighbor thing. This is an investment for your wife. That if you can control yourself now, when you get into a tempting situation when your wife is 9.5 months pregnant or whatever, or she gets cancer, God forbid, and she doesn't look like the way she did when you first were attracted to her, that you would be able to have the strength of character to be able to maintain your fidelity to her and not run off on her. And so, if you phrase it that way, that's a completely separate conversation.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
But again, if you tell the person, oh no, your pleasure is paramount in sexuality, that's the number one thing that's important. Okay, great. What if she gets leukemia and she can't move and all her hair comes out because she's doing chemo? Well, she's not going to be able to deliver that type of pleasure to you, my guy. And what principle are you giving these kids and these teenagers if you just tell them, hey, go for it, wrap it up? Well, what's going to keep that guy faithful in that situation? These are important questions. But at the same time, if you rack these kids with guilt all the time, and you just pound them over and over again with guilt and make them feel at the end, you think that now that they're married, they're going to jump in the sack and everything's going to be okay. Some people are like that. You were like that. Oh, no? Okay. I didn't know that.
Well, yeah, there's lots of things now. I'll tell you later.
Yeah, some people are like that, but it's really destructive on the mind, I think, to just constantly flood people with these guilty things and base, like my man Augustine, I love him, but
remember I used to tell you I always had bad feelings after?
Yeah.
So I wasn't
in
my previous marriage, yeah.
Right. Well,
there's multiple things going on.
There are multiple things going on in that situation, but no, I'm with you, but so anyway, that's kind of my take on it. Is that it's not as simple as either one of us or either side is saying. Like there's really heavy things to think about on both sides.
So, moral of the story: sexuality is good. Find out what it really means, and don't let the devil in.
Which the devil comes in many forms, and sometimes he comes in a religious form, and I would say that...
Well, that's what it made me think of when we first started the song, is the people that have been in those situations, and then they walked away from it because religion itself was too high of a bar, because it wasn't just about Jesus, it was about, all these rules that other people were putting on him, and all these extra things, and it was like, I can't do this, and so, like you said, sometimes the only way to actually still kind of be with God is to reject all the things that you think are of God.
Yeah.
But,
otherwise people will, crazy stuff.
Anyways, a 9.9 for me.
Why am I not surprised?
It.
It's a 9.4 for me. Good song, good discussion. There you are. Vin out.
Sori out.
Gone.